This What's Working with Cam Marston podcast is brought to you courtesy of Michelob Ultra Beer.
They say consistency is the key to success. They weren't wrong. So how about grabbing a beer that's consistently smooth, consistently refreshing, and consistently light? You might just find that the road to success can be pretty enjoyable. Michelob Ultra, the perfect balance of taste and refreshment, and only 2.6 carbs and 95 calories. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. Enjoy responsibly. Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
I can say with confidence, you're going to enjoy this show. Hello and welcome to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is the show designed to bring you the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace trends that are shaping the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace around us. I try to find the guests that can talk to us about the trends and something that they say we can implement in our own businesses, in our own world, in our own lives that'll make each of us just a little bit better at whatever it is we do. That's the goal. That's the goal that I set out for the show in 2018, and I'm happy to see through the interactions I have with my listeners that it's working, and that's great stuff. So before we get into this, let me tell you where you can find this one because you're going to want to send this to people you know. Go to whatsworkingcam.com where you will find this show as a podcast. And there you can subscribe and do all those kind of things. But you're going to want to send this one because our focus on today's episode is Gen Z. Others call them the iGen. I often refer to them as an iGen, lowercase I, Gen, much like iPhone and iPad, etc. But most people refer to them as Gen Z. And we're going to talk about Gen Z today. Who they are, where they've come from, what shaped them, how they're evolving, how their parenting trends are influencing each of them. And most importantly for my listeners, what do you need to know to get them to work, to bring them into your workplace? How do you recruit them in there? And how do you get them? Now, in my world outside this radio show, I'm having a lot of people say, I'm struggling here. We're reading about the Great Resignation, which includes some of the iGen. But more importantly, I think what I've seen more recently is we're reading about those that don't quit and leave, but quit and stay. In other words, they're still employed and they're doing nearly the minimal in order to stay employed. Another article I read is that Gen Z is pushing back on the hustle of the workplace. I don't want to have to hustle. I don't want to have to work so hard so fast. I'm not so sure it's worth it. And there's a lot of, let's say, structural reasoning behind it. And by that, I mean, it's a generation that has identified structural problems in our society, in particularly the workplace, where we're telling them to push. You need to be loyal. You need to work hard. You need to give us extra hours. They're saying, I don't know. And we're going to talk about why that is and where it comes from. My guest today is Bruce Tulgan. Now, Bruce and I have known of one another for years. He was kind of the guy that led out of the gate in this generational research that I do. I started into it and I said, who else is doing it out there? And I learned that Bruce had been doing it for a while. And for the longest time, I considered him my greatest competitor. And now I consider him a wonderful, nice guy and great colleague who I call upon for ideas and insights. And you'll hear that in this conversation he and I are about to have when we come back from break. Bruce has written extensively on all the generations and solutions to workplace problems. And I consider him one of the thought leaders in this space. Even though I'm in this space as well, I consider him the thought leader in this space. And it's wonderful to reconnect with him. When we come back, we're talking about Gen Z with Bruce Tulgan and what we need to know to engage them in the workplace. Before break, though, let's talk about the professionals at Sandifer Wealth. Certified financial planners must meet rigorous educational, ethical, and experiential standards in order to be considered a CFP. Planning properly will drive the results that you're looking for in your savings and investments. Sandifer Wealth Management has 2 CFPs. Both Jamie Sandifer and Mark Salyers are CFPs. Visit their website at Sandifer Wealth Management. You can find him here in Mobile, Alabama. However, they'll work with you wherever you are. And I can vouch for these 2 guys. Great guys. I'll be seeing them again here later this week to visit and catch up. All right, when we come back from break, Bruce Tulgan, we're talking about Gen Z. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate at the Culverhouse College of Business, all housed at the University of Alabama. The Alabama Center for Real Estate, better known as ACRE, housed at the University of Alabama's Culverhouse College of Business, is committed to industry engagement and dedicated to shaping the future of real estate through excellence in teaching, research, and service to drive economic and workforce development in Alabama. ACRE and Alabama, a championship collaboration. Learn more at www.acre.culverhouse.ua.edu. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. I'm on the line with what I consider a great friend whom I've never met, Bruce Tulgan. He's calling in, or we're speaking in your home in Boston, isn't it, Bruce?
I'm calling from my office in New Haven, but close enough. We're only 2 hours from Boston.
Okay. Up there somewhere.
I am a Red Sox fan, Cam.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, everybody here down in the Deep South considers that up there somewhere. So Bruce is calling in from up there somewhere, just like he's speaking to us down here somewhere. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business at the University of Alabama. Bruce, thank you for your willingness to join the show again. Welcome back to What's Working.
Thank you so much for having me back. And every time I hear your voice, Cam, I am inspired. And it's just a pleasure and an honor always to get a chance to do anything with you.
Well, I'm going to take that clip and separate it and play it every morning when I wake up. That is the great way to begin every day. So thank you for that. Bruce and I, for those of you, I don't think many people know this. Bruce and I both stepped into the speaking, the consulting world around generational dynamics and generational change in the workplace about the same time. Bruce was on the forefront of it, and I was following in his shadow. I would always hear his name. And Bruce, I was envious and jealous of you. Now, as I said prior to beginning the recording, I've become just an advocate and a fan. And the reason for me reaching out to you and wanting you back on the show is due to the requests from listeners, the requests from peers and colleagues around town, requests from clients saying, Cam, what's up with Gen Z? And when I heard that request a number of times, I realized you have done some research, some early thought-leading research on Gen Z, and that's what I want to get into. If you don't mind, start by explaining to the listeners who Gen Z is from your point of view.
Yeah, so at Rainmaker Thinking, we've been tracking young people in the workplace since 1993 when I was a young people. You and I were both young, right?
Yeah.
And I was a young, unhappy lawyer, so I thought, I'm going to start interviewing young people and find somebody who's happy. And anyway, that ended up turning into a book. And so we've been tracking young people along the way. And I think you would agree probably that the end of one generation and the beginning of another is always a little fuzzy. But our current working definition of Generation Z is those born 1997 is the first birth year. And so, if you look at those folks, gosh, some of them are 25. So we started interviewing Gen Zers 7-8 years ago, but we didn't know it was Generation Z. At that point, we thought, well, these are still the second wave millennials. The millennial generation is so big, we carve it up into 2 waves. And we're always fine-tuning our definitions. But right now, It's those workers born 1997 and later. That's who we're treating as Generation Z.
Good. Let's kick off there. So 25-ish years old and younger, coming out of colleges, coming out of high schools, entering into the workplace, and the leadership of the workplace today is coming to me saying, "What's going on with kids these days? What's happened to them to make them the way they are?" And my first reaction to that, Bruce, and I'm very interested in your thoughts, is I'm not aware of a time where a young generation hasn't entered the workplace and the senior generations disparage them. It happened when Generation X entered the workplace. As a Generation Xer, I remember them saying, "What's wrong with you Xers?" As the millennials entered the workplace, they're saying, "What's wrong with you millennials?" Gen Z is doing the same. "What's wrong with you Gen Z people?" But it always seems to, work out. They were disparaging Generation X, and now my peers and colleagues, and yours too, are leading companies with a very noble work ethic. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, some aspects of generational change in the workplace are just about having older, more experienced people looking over their shoulders and seeing these younger, less experienced people coming in. And, I mean, there's a long-range term of art to describe this phenomenon, right? It's kids today.
Yeah, yeah.
And when we were, as you say, in the early 90s, it was, these Generation Xers are disloyal. They have short attention spans. They don't want to work as hard. They demand immediate gratification. They want everything their own way, and they want it right now. Not a very flattering profile, but it sounds very, very familiar, right? Yeah. That's what they're saying about the millennials, and that's what people say about Generation Z. My view is that about half of this is just about being young, but the other half is true generational difference, and what makes for generational difference, I always say, is accidents of history. We all live through accidents of history. And depending on where you are in your life, what life stage you're at when 9/11 happens, what life stage you're at when the Great Recession happens, what life stage you're at when the pandemic occurs, right? That it's where are you during these accidents of history? Where are you in your life and maybe in your career that make up real generational difference? So I think it's a dovetail. It's natural life stage and accidents of history. And I sometimes say, if you look at the second wave millennials compared to the first wave millennials, you can see differences. I mean, if you came into your early adulthood in the 90s, you're very different than if you come into your early adulthood in the 2000s. And I think we're seeing this writ large now with Generation Z. I mean, gosh, talk about an accident of history. If you came into the workplace in the last 2 years, the workplace wasn't a place.
No,
for a lot of people. That is a profound generationally shaping experience.
So let's talk about these accidents. And you can't see me. You and I are separated. My hands are trembling. I'm nodding all over the place. You and I are speaking a language that I love here. The accidents of history that have changed, and we could do this forever, but have impacted Gen Z. Prioritize them for me on what you think the most important ones are that will impact this generation for the rest of their lives.
I mean, I think growing up during a 20-year period when this country, and I don't mean to be so American-centric, but I am, we've been in the post-9/11 environment, we've been afraid of terrorism and at war for 2 decades, and there's been fear of environmental collapse this whole time, and economic crisis followed by a short boom, followed by more economic turmoil, the pandemic. I mean, that's the story of the last 20 years. That, and of course, globalization and technology. But globalization and technology have been shaping change for about 13,000 years.
Yeah.
But I sometimes say, meanwhile, parenting norms have changed. I often say, if you want to understand Generation Z, think of it this way. They're like children of the 1930s, right? Economic turmoil and then war. of global significance. They're like children of the 1930s. If children in the 1930s were raised by helicopter parents on steroids, and if they had learned how to think, learn, and communicate while attached to handheld supercomputers.
Yeah. You've developed a compelling picture here, Bruce.
Yeah. So, I mean, what they are is they are not raised, like if you were raised in the 90s or if you came of age in the 90s, it's peace and prosperity. The United States is the only global superpower, the rise of the internet, magical business models, a foosball table in every teeming space.
Right.
Remember the 90s? It was awesome.
Right.
And then, but for our children they've grown up during a time of tremendous fear and jeopardy, but at a time when parents aren't just helicopter parents anymore. There's a helicopter behind the kids and a snowplow in front of them, clearing the way.
Yeah.
And they have tricorders, and they grew up with tricorders.
Right.
For those who are young, in the olden days, there was a television show called Star Trek, and tricorders were a thing of the future. Well, it turns out there's an infinite world of information and people available at their fingertips with the touch of a button with the touch of a screen from the time they can remember. So it's a peculiar time. I mean, I sometimes think that Gen Zers, they're so self-possessed. They don't have a single way. You can't convince them that there's one way to think about or do anything.
No.
Because they know too much.
They have so much access to information. Incidentally, I call them, in addition to the helicopter and the snowplow parents, I call them drone parents. And I am a drone parent. We have 4 teenagers in our household. And on my handheld device, I can identify where my children are at any given moment of the day. And I'm watching them, and I'm watching how fast they go in the car. This device, this app called Life 360 tells me exactly where they are, how fast they're traveling if they're in the car. And I can then call that child and say, how dare you be going that fast in that car at this time of day with these people in your car? And by the way, how dare you answer the phone when you're going that fast at this time of day with these people in their car? We're a drone. They don't know we're watching them until we strike. And when we strike, it's shock and awe, and they're wondering what's going on. But I think we talk about this drone component thing or the helicopter thing, and watching time, we need to go to break. In fact, Bruce, I want to talk to you about the significance of parenting trends on shaping this generation and how that may relate to the workplace. I've got some theories on this, and yes, everything that you and I have mentioned thus far has shaped this generation, but so have the parenting trends that we have told our kids, do this, want this, behave this way, and this will be the result. And we got to talk about whether that promise is valid or not, and whether these kids have realized before we have that promise may no longer be valid. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Let's go to break. We'll come back. I got Bruce Tulgan on the line with me, friend of mine, author of many, many different books on generational trends in the workplace and the marketplace. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate at the Culverhouse College of Business, University of Alabama. Be right back. Sitting with Cajun Mike, owner E3 Termite and Pest Control. Cajun Mike, there are people I know that think their house is fully protected because there's some bait stations around the house. What's your thoughts?
My thought personally is bait stations do work. However, I do not believe in them as a standalone product.
What else do they need?
We do 3, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 treatments on a house. We will do a true liquid perimeter treatment. We do hollow void treatments, and we use bore care on wood when we can access it.
It's a thorough treatment, top to bottom, it sounds like, much more so than the bait station.
That is correct.
How do they find you, Cajun Mike?
They can find me at 251-850-PEST or e3pest.com.
e3pest.com. Customer service never goes out of style. In fact, I think it's safe to say that customer service is more valuable and more important now more than ever. Hi, this is Cam Marston. One thing that my over 200 episodes of What's Working has taught me is how important customer service is to building and maintaining a thriving business. It's the growing need for customer service that's led me to partner with one of the state's leading customer service trainers to create our program called Delivering 5-Star Customer Service. Your team will get one 90-minute training session per month for 6 consecutive months. Each session builds on the skills learned the previous month, allowing your customer-facing teams to practice before moving on to the next lesson. And the 6 lessons address everything from appearance to electronic communications to conflict resolution to maintaining a service mindset. Our program travels and is delivered in person at your workplace, nothing virtual. You simply can't practice the level of the skills this course teaches virtually. For more information, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's schedule a time to talk. Remember, you have less to fear from outside competition than you do from discourtesy and bad service from inside your own company. Again, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's talk about your business. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. On the line with me is Bruce Tulgan from up east somewhere. He's got a bunch of books about the generational change in the workplace, and he's a colleague of mine. We're talking about what's going on to Gen Z. Gen Z, by the way, if you've just joined us, about 25 years old and younger. What has shaped them, what employers can expect from them in the workplace, etc. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, Culverhouse College of Business, University of Alabama. Bruce, prior to break, we were talking a little bit about the parenting trends that I think have had an extraordinary influence on Gen Z and how they're going to come out. And I look at my kids and hypothetically say, work hard, go to school, show up, do all these work ethic kind of historical things, and you can have this kind of life someday for yourself. And I'm not so sure my kids aren't looking at me going, thanks for the warning. Not sure I want that. Looks like work. You worry a lot. You got bills to pay, etc. So we're going to take a different tack. We're going to choose something different. But my model is the model that the employers are looking for, that everybody that's listening to this show right now who has employees wants a loyal, dedicated, hardworking employee. They're struggling to find them. They're telling me anecdotally that when my baby boomers retire, it requires 2 people to replace them due to the quote unquote, air quotes here, work ethic of the next generation. And I can't help but wonder if the next generation is going, I don't want what you have. Therefore, what you do to get it is a valid warning for me. React to that for me.
Yeah, well, I think there's 2 things. One, remember that pay your dues, climb the ladder, do as you're told, keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, wait for the boss to notice you, wait for the system to take care of you. That depends on having confidence in long-term vesting rewards, and it depends on having confidence in the stability of institutions, right? So I think those 2 fundamental aspects of the old-fashioned model have broken down. My view is that young people are not lazy. I don't think they have short attention spans. I don't think it's true that they don't want to work hard. If you don't believe me, follow me around sometime when I'm working with the United States Marine Corps, the United States Army, or the Air Force, or, you want to see a bunch of young people who are loyal and can focus like a laser beam, pun intended, and work really, really hard, and not just that, but in mission-driven work, right? Similar, follow me around sometime when I'm working at the YMCA. It's not that they're disloyal or have short attention spans or don't want to work hard. It's that they look around and think, silly grown-up, don't you see how uncertain the world is? And look how much things can change overnight based on things you weren't even aware of. Forget that you misjudged them, but they're factors that came out of nowhere. And so when you start realizing that institutions are not stable and that long-term vesting rewards are not secure, then you naturally start thinking more short-term and transactional, And you naturally start thinking about not building a career and then wrapping your life around it. But you think about, what kind of life do I want to build, and how do I wrap work and earning and contribution? How do I wrap work and earning and contribution around the kind of life I want to have? And I think that's where young people are coming from today. And I think it comes from a combination of factors, big historical factors, and then micro trends like parenting. But bear in mind, the helicopter, snowplow, I like drone. I hereby promise I'll quote you, drone parenting. There's also a huge socioeconomic divide, and there's still plenty of young people who are coming of age without that kind of support from parents, teachers, counselors, and the rest of the adult posse. But I think from both directions, from the side of socioeconomic well-being and from the side of socioeconomic deprivation, you have young people coming of age realizing that they got to take care of themselves.
So what are you telling? Let's translate this into, and I'm with you on you got to take care of yourself. The response from my employers, the clients that I'm dealing with, is need a lot of attention, need a lot of babying. They don't see got to take care of yourself. The employers are seeing you take care of me. I need more than ever, than any employee has ever needed. And that includes the shocking amount of tension that the millennials needed. It is now even going up. Imagine with me that there is someone in front of you who is saying, Bruce, help me understand this, which we are doing, you and I are doing. But what do I do about it? What do I do about it? I need a stable, predictable, reliable workforce who will engage. And from what I'm deducing from your comments is the attitude of the workforce, the workplace rather, the attitude of the workplace must shift in order to accommodate this next generation workforce. So what are you telling the employers?
Yeah, I mean, well, I always say 12 may be the new 19, but 30 is the new 20, so be patient. And, of course, you need people who can get a bunch of work done very well, very fast, all day long. You need people who can accumulate some kind of professional experience and maturity. And some work itself requires experience, and you can't get on board and up to speed super fast. It takes time. If you're in healthcare, if you're an engineer, if you're in any of the professional services, it takes time to become a mature professionle. So of course that's true. What I tell business leaders is keep your eye on the ball. You got to get, you're not going to wish people to be old-fashioned again in a newfangled world. But it may be that old-fashioned leadership is what will get you what you need. So if you need people to do a bunch of work very well, very fast, all day long, and stick around longer and give discretionary performance, you're going to have to commit to high maintenance leadership. That means in the hiring process, sure, you sell, but also tell them all the downsides of the job and see who's left. They're the ones, right? Because, you don't sell them in the door. Sell them up to the door, then try to scare them away, see who's left, right? That's a shortcut in hiring that I always recommend. Then when you get them in, you can't just say, hey, sink or swim, kid, reinvent the wheel, figure it out. We're understaffed, so I don't have time to get you on board and up to speed. No, you'll lose them.
You'll lose them instantly. I have this deep hunch that the new generation entering the workplace has determined how long they'll be there within the first couple of hours of their first day on the job. I interrupted you. Keep going.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. But the problem is very often they'll decide to leave without leaving. This new conversation that's being had about quiet quitting.
Yes.
I've been enjoying it because for years I've been writing about leaving without leaving, which is, you seemed so great when we hired you, and you were even good for the first couple days, weeks, months, whatever. But very often they decide to leave without leaving, and so you're still paying them, and you say, hey, can you help out with this? And they're like, nah, sorry, I can't help. Gotta go. or now, of course, maybe they're working remotely. So onboarding and up-to-speed training is critical. You've got to schedule the first minute, the first hour, the first day, the first week. I think, if you're smart, you schedule the first month, hour by hour. And you don't have them shadow Mr. Blue or whatever. You've got to have a rigorous onboarding schedule for them that includes one-on-one meetings where they get to know the people who are going to be their up, down, sideways, and diagonal colleagues, where they have specific reading assignments and deliverables, where they're going to meetings with a specific assignment of what they should go in there trying to learn. And what you want to do is give them a connection to the mission, give them a connection to the people, give them a connection to the work, and start being able to add value, right? I always tell people you want them to own one concrete task as soon as possible, and then add another task and another task. You don't want them to feel like they're flailing. Or like, a lot of employers are like, oh, yeah, geez, how long is this kid going to last anyway? Well, if the kid's here in 6 months, then we'll talk to him. So you have to be super engaged. And my view is that the next piece of the puzzle is hand off to a highly engaged leader. Because if you don't hand them off to a highly engaged leader, then no matter how rigorous your onboarding is, if you hand them off to a weak, hands-off, disengaged leader, then that's when you're going to lose them. And what ends up happening is, remember, relationships are very important to young people at work, and they're harder to navigate, harder to manage, especially in a remote environment. But if the leader, manager, supervisor is not their most important, fulfilling relationship at work, you better worry about who is, because that's how cliques form, ringleaders emerge. Relationship discomfort starts to happen, resentment starts to happen, and again, then you lose them. But a lot of them will just, you keep paying them. You won't even know you lost them until they get a better offer. Yeah, there's quitting and leaving, and there's quitting and staying, and quitting and staying is worse. I think that's what I'm reading out there as well. I saw something recently about why should I hustle? My boss is telling me to hustle, that I need to get more done in the same amount of time, and I'm not so sure I'm in for the hustle. Now, when we come back from break, what you've described here, Bruce, is just beautiful. And if I'm the U.S. Army with extraordinary resources, then I can perhaps put something like this into place. But if I'm an accounting firm with 10 employees and I need somebody new, and I'm hearing you say this, I'm thinking, we don't have the resources for that. We just need to find somebody to come in and work. That's what I hear so much. I was with financial advisors a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, it sounds great, Cam, but we're a staff of 4, and we need a new person, and you're asking me to essentially divest myself from the business for 6 months to get this person up to speed, which is still an unknown quantity. Let's talk about, when we come back from break, the small business approach to this, and if there's not a hybrid model. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston, on the line with Bruce Tulgan. He's up east. He's written extensively about the generations in the workplace. We're talking about Gen Z, also referred to in some quarters as the iGen. We'll be right back after this. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate at the Culverhouse College of Business, all housed at the University of Alabama. The Alabama Center for Real Estate, known as ACRE, strives every day to be a valued resource that supports and promotes Alabama's real estate industry and promotes economic and workforce development across the great state of Alabama. ACRE and Alabama, a championship collaboration. Get to know ACRE and learn more about their offerings and their events at their website, www.acre.culverhouse.ua.edu.
This is Bill Wasden, labor and employment attorney at Burr and Forman. With offices across Alabama, our attorneys are keenly aware of employment situations in a state with under 3% unemployment. Employers have faced many obstacles over the last 2 years, and new processes and policies must be in place to ensure you're setting clear expectations for your employees. We've created a list of the top 5 legal and operating issues facing employers in 2022 that will, ultimately, ensure your company is prepared for a data breach, the Great Resignation, new presidential executive orders, or potential overtime rule changes. Reach out to me at bwisden@burr.com, that's BURR.com, or my partner Katie Willis, kwillis@burr.com, for this information. Burr attorneys are here to help you with your labor and employment law needs.
No representation is made that the quality of the legal services to be performed is greater than the quality of legal services performed by other lawyers. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. I'm on the phone with Bruce Tulgan. Bruce has written extensively about the generations in the workplace, and we're talking about this next generation called Gen Z, roughly 25 years old and younger, vexing many of the employers that I deal with, and Bruce as well. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate at the Culverhouse College of Business at the University of Alabama. Bruce, imagine that I'm a small business person. You've given me an extraordinary amount of work to do to embrace this next generation, but it looks daunting to me. What is your advice to the small business, the family business, let's say, the business that feels like a family? How do they manage these extraordinary demands that the next generation is putting on them so that they will become a predictable, productive employee?
Well, I mean, if you want to look at it as a small family business, then you better practice in loco parentis management. That's what I always tell people. And look, there are business reasons. If you don't, you're going to have unnecessary problems occur. You're going to have problems get out of control. You're going to have resources that are not well planned and are squandered. People are going to go in the wrong direction. So you want to save yourself and your new young employees and the rest of your employees from having to clean up unnecessary problems. And I call it coaching style management or in loco parentis management. This doesn't mean you have to put everything else on hold. But remember, work is a day-to-day transaction. And if you want people to get on board and up to speed quickly, you got to help them. If you want them to give you discretionary extra performance, that hustle you mentioned earlier, you got to help them. And if you want them to stay longer and work harder while they're staying longer, rather than stay longer but just phone it in, you got to do your part. And so you got to figure out, how are you going to create this short-term transactional leverage with them? My view is strong, supportive leadership is the best way. That means if you have team huddles, make them really good, make sure they're included. It means you don't have to spend all day every day with them, but you want to do coaching style one-on-one with them first thing in the day, spin them up. At the end of the day, wind them down. And, you want to focus on concrete expectations for today, tomorrow, this week. And the more you teach them to manage themselves, teach them to take notes, teach them to use checklists, teach them to get their hands on job aids that will guide them. They need guidance, direction, support, and coaching, and it's going to be high maintenance, but it's going to be a lot less high maintenance than spending all your time cleaning up unnecessary problems, then thinking, gosh, we hired the wrong person, trying again and having the same thing happen.
Lot less high maintenance than constant turnover. And I'm with you on that. Tell me about recruiting. I mean, that many of the employers we can't find anybody. Is there a secret source that you're aware of, or a magic phrase that a potential employer uses that seems to attract Gen Z? A location and a phrase that suddenly these people who claim we can't find anybody to hire will have quick success?
Well, I can say this: if there were a secret reservoir of young people, I think you or I would probably have learned about it.
Yeah.
So, there are great sources of new talent. I mean, outplacement in the military is a good example. I mean, but schools. Look, recruiting, especially for small organizations, is a relationship business. And parents, teachers, and counselors are great sources of great young people. employee referral programs are great if they're well managed. But when I talk with employers, one of the things I find is, I'll say to them, like, what is the employer story you're telling?
Yeah.
And usually, especially if it's a small business, the employer story they're telling is the same employer story they've always been telling. It's about them. It's about them.
Yeah.
It's about their history. Maybe it's about their mission. But I always say you've got to orient your employer story around the dream job factors that young people are looking for today. How do you help a young person create a dream job for today, tomorrow, this week, this month, this year? They care about money. Anyone who tells you they don't care about money is living on another planet. But once you tell them, okay, this is what we're going to pay you, they want to know, what do I need to do to earn more?
Right.
Now, that seems demanding. But what they're really saying is, how do I go above and beyond? What do I need to do to earn more? They want to know, who am I going to be reporting to? Or, they really value supportive leadership. They really care about relationships at work. So you got to decide which relationships. They care about their role, their tasks, their responsibilities. How many ditches do I have to dig to earn a more interesting task? Okay, location, sure, that matters. What about my specific workspace? And today you have to address, if you want them to be in a particular location during certain hours, why? Scheduling flexibility is one of the most important things to them. What am I going to be expected to learn, and how am I expected to learn it? And am I going to have help with that? Mostly they want to be protected from unnecessary problems and unnecessary surprises. All of this, that's, by the way, if you're hearing all this and you think, well, gosh, I could barely do all that for my kids. Ding, 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 ding.
Right.
Yeah. Right. That's why I call it in loco parentis management. It is high maintenance. But you got to be honest with yourself. Who in your organization is charged with leading, managing, and supervising your new young employees? That's the killer app. Who is their day-to-day interface?
Yeah.
Who is managing them? Who is making expectations clear? Who is tracking performance? Who is the one doing problem solving with them when things don't go right? And who is the one who is recognizing, celebrating, and rewarding them when things do go right? So that's what you got to get at.
I love it. You and I are in lockstep on this, and it's wonderful to hear. The question comes to me, and I'm interested in your answer. Cam, what's going to happen? What's the future look like? Is this the end of America? Is this the end of the free world? Is this the end of the free enterprise system? And Bruce, I would add that these are the same questions that were asked when Generation X was this age, were asked when the millennials were this age. My reaction to that is that in time, people it's a life stage. What we're experiencing right now is a life stage in Gen Z. And in time, their life stages change. They get updated. Their priorities change, just like mine did. And suddenly our approach to work and fulfillment and what's important at work begins to change. What is your take on what's going to happen? Where does this all go? Is it a similar path that what's happened to Gen X and the millennials? Is that Gen Z's future as well?
Well, I do think that people, as they move into more adult life stage where they have family to take care of and perhaps more stable housing, that people do get more conservative. The question is, what is conservative in today's environment? Yeah. Is it hitching your wagon to the star of an established organization and putting all your eggs in one basket? I think to most people in today's environment, that doesn't sound so conservative or secure. In fact, when I talk with people in their 50s and 60s, what they say to me is, hey, I'm thinking more like a free agent too. Yeah. Right? I'm interested in that gig work. I want to know, what do you have for me today, tomorrow, next week? I want to know, what should I be doing to stay secure? And it's not always having all your eggs in one basket. So I do think people get more conservative as they get older and more experienced and have more responsibilities. So I agree with that. I do think durations of employment are changing. I think the nature of work is changing. I think the pandemic took us through about 25 years of trend acceleration on remote work. I think that hasn't been sorted out yet. And I don't think we know exactly where we're going to land on that. And I think that's different. And I also think the rise of what many call gig work is something I've been tracking now for 21 years since I wrote Winning the Talent Wars. I do think that the old-fashioned working for the same organization for many, many years, we've all been watching that one fade away. But full-time, on-site, uninterrupted, exclusive work, which is what defined a job. I think all of those are now in play. And so I think it's less about young people and more about the changes in the nature of work and changes in how organizations are going to get work done. I mean, also look at artificial intelligence, right? Look at 3D printing, look at smart machines. Years ago, I remember talking to the supermarket industry about, what you guys need is your own version of an ATM. Now, every time I go to the supermarket, I'm annoyed because I would much prefer to be cashed out by a person.
I know. That's what I'm paying for.
Yeah, but everyone is moving in this direction. Look at Amazon, how that's disrupted traditional retail, which is where, by the way, a lot of young people used to get their start as a worker. So I think there's so much in flux and one thing I do think is young people are always the canaries in the coal mine. You want to know what's going to happen, watch them. Don't talk to an old guy like me.
Yeah, you and me both. Bruce, this is fascinating. You and I could go on forever on this. There's so many angles to this that I love to talk about, but we need to bring it to a close. I'm going to give you, I want the listeners to know where they can find more. How can they find you? How can they find your books? How can they find your research?
Yeah, the best way to find me is rainmakerthinking.com. That's the best way to find me. And books are, on Amazon. There's a whole bunch of them. So if you really want one of my books, send me an email, brucet@rainmakerthinking.com, so I can help you figure out which one, and I'll probably just send it to you.
Oh, that's a generous offer. That's very nice of you. Bruce, it's always fascinating. And like you, I'm getting these questions from people. What's going to happen? Where are we going to end up? We don't have it sorted out yet. We don't know. The pandemic was an extraordinary accelerator of our future, and we are struggling to catch up. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be painful for a little while. It's going to be interesting. I can't thank you enough for your time, Bruce. I'm looking forward to having you back on the show for the third time.
Thank you so much, Cam. It's always a privilege and an honor, and I always learn so much every time I talk with you.
One of these days, you and I will shake hands live in person. I'm looking forward to that day. Folks,
yeah,
Bruce,
well, as of now, I still entertain the possibility you might be a hologram.
I think my kids and my wife would like that, kind of. I wish you weren't. I like hearing him from time to time, but sometimes I wish you just weren't real.
All right, man. Take care. Thanks so much.
You're listening to What's Working. When we come back, we'll be in segment 5. We'll recap the show. Bruce Tulgan, find him online. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, Culverhouse College of Business, University of Alabama. This is Cam Marston in the studio with Cajun Mike. Cajun Mike, what's going on at E3 Pest Control? What you guys doing today that's different?
Well, what we're doing different is we are treating homes that have spray foam installation, and we're able to give them a full bond, whereas other companies are not able to.
How does the treatment work with the spray foam?
Basically, we spray the spray foam with Burr Care. Burr Care absorbs into the spray foam. It prevents termites from landing on it and creating an above-ground carton.
Is there any restrictions or limits to how you can do this, or is it any home with spray foam?
Basically, any home with spray foam.
How do they find you, Cajun Mike?
Find me at 251-850-7378 or e3pest.com.
That's e3pest.com.
This is David Steele, managing partner of Monroe Meat Company in Beatrice, Alabama. We stay busy making sausage, processing deer, calling on customers, trying to sell the best sausage and bacon that can be found. But when I have time to take a break, I'm listening to What's Working with Cam Marston. Now, back to the show.
Oh, man, that was so good. So energizing, however daunting at the same time. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, Culverhouse College of Business, all housed at the University of Alabama. Bruce Tulgan, very generous with his time and expertise, but I tell you, Bruce had solutions. He sure did have some solutions and some good ideas, etc. Executing those solutions is no simple task. You heard him talk about them. No simple task, and a lot of heavy lifting there. I guess the question is, would I prefer the continued turnover? Would I prefer the continued quit and stay? Or should I engage in these tasks that Bruce mentioned and see if I can't solve the problem? I'd love your thoughts. I'd love your feedback and what you hear. Email me, CAM at cammarston.com. Maybe we can read some of your comments on the air about this episode. I know it's going to be controversial. Or email me from my website, what'sworkingcam.com. You can engage us there, talk about shows, hear things upcoming. And I hope you'll find me on social media, Cam Marston. Sometimes it's Cam Marston in the numeral 1. Follow me and all that. Shows brought to you are produced by Ion Digital and John Thompson. We'll have another show next week. Have a good week, everybody.